Solving the cube one-handed is very different from solving the cube two-handed because it's a bit unnatural and it takes a lot of practice just to be able to do the finger tricks. In this video, I will be covering the most important concepts and fundamentals to get you started with solving the Rubik's Cube one-handed. Most cubers will solve the cube one-handed using their left hand, and that's because it makes it easier to do RU moves. So if you're right-handed, you may think that your left hand is the weaker of your two hands, so you might be wondering why you should pick your left hand. But in reality, it doesn't really matter, and people can get comfortable with either of their hands. It's just that R and U moves tend to be more comfortable, which is why people choose their left hand. Now, if you're just trying to learn the concepts, it doesn't really matter what cube you use, but once you start practicing more often, you really want to make sure you have a cube that won't injure yourself and doesn't take too much muscle. So you can pick really any cube that has lube in it and can turn rather effortlessly. It doesn't have to be too effortless as long as you don't feel like you're straining your hand just by doing a few turns. So I hear that for one hand, a lot of people like the Mini WeiLong, which is not the WeiLong GTS, but the original WeiLong, and I just happen to have one in white. So personally, I don't see what's so great about it, but I mean, a lot of people really like it, so I don't practice one hand that much anyway, so I think it's a good one to go by if you don't know which one to get. But really, a lot of different cubes could work. So the cube I'm using in this video is the original WeiLong GTS, not the GTS version 2, and that's just because I got comfortable with this one. So now I will be going over how to turn the cube, and before you turn, make sure you have your fingers in the right position. So your thumb goes about here, and your middle finger and ring finger back here. And then the most important turns you're going to be doing are R turns and U turns. So R goes like this, use your pinky to push up like that. So another important turn is R prime. So you put your pinky finger up here, and pull back like this. Now, this is probably the hardest turn to do out of the fundamental turns. So over time, it will get easier though. Next, we have U prime, which is pretty obvious, is just the regular U prime. And then the last fundamental turn is U, which is like this. So now I encourage you to either try some algorithms or try some random turns. For example, 6 sexy moves. Now, of course, it wouldn't be going that fast if it's your first time. So that covers all of the R turns and U turns. Other than that, you're mostly going to be doing rotations. So if you only have these 4 turns at your disposal, some example algorithms you could do, for example, U Perm and T Perm, which has F turns, but you can just rotate. Now that isn't the best way to do T-Perm, but using only these 4 turns, it's still not bad. Now you can also rotate the cube on the Z-axis like this in order to do L moves or D moves. For example, here is an R-Perm with D moves. And here's a J-Perm with L moves. So I don't know if you noticed during that J-Perm, I did a special finger trick, and that was an L like this. So now we're going to go into more advanced finger tricks than just the basic 4. Now, first of all, a lot of algorithms will have F turns. So F is a very important finger trick, and you do it the same way as in two-hand, you just use your thumb. For F turns, you can also do it with this part of your hand if it's an algorithm that makes it easier to do it that way. I personally don't do it that way. Then there's F prime. So there's a few ways to do this. One way is to use your thumb like this and just go in reverse. I personally find this to be a bit weird to regrip all of my fingers at once to do that move. So what I do is similar to when you do a two-handed J-Perm, you just do this. It might cause some layers to misalign at first, but you'll get used to it. Now I will show an example T-Perm with those F finger tricks. So R2 can be done with a double flick using your ring finger and pinky, but that does mean you have to remove your ring finger off of here and possibly move your middle finger as well. So it goes like this, pinky and then ring finger. This one might take a while to get used to. So you can use this in algorithms such as U Perm. So instead of R2 like this, you can do R2 with one finger instead, which is just your pinky. So just do R prime and then continue the R prime by pushing your pinky even further. So like this. So an example of where you could use this is at the end of the U Perm. Then there's U2, which is like this, the same as for two hands. However, that does mean you have to regrip your middle finger, which is probably the most important finger for holding the cube. So typically people will do U like this, or U prime, but there are some situations where doing a U2 can be beneficial. For example, there's this one-handed J-Perm algorithm that if you start with a U2 flick, then that's actually okay because you don't really need your middle finger there afterwards. But then for the second U2, you should do single U's. So like this. Another important finger trick is another way to do U. So U is typically done like this, which requires extending the index finger a long way. So instead you can just push back from here. So some people prefer doing this more often than doing this, but it's really just up to which one you prefer. I personally prefer doing this more often, but there are times where I will use this instead. For example, when you're doing R prime, it's very convenient to do it like this, R, U, and then R prime with your index finger. And some situations where this may come up is in the V perm, which goes like this. So the reason it's important there is because you have to do D turns right afterwards. So doing this and then this helps you do the rotation while doing some moves. For D turns, you can either rotate and use your pinky, or you can do it like you would in two hands, which is with your ring finger. So the finger tricks are all the same. D is pretty straightforward, and D prime just pushes the other way. So for example, for E perm, so what people typically do in order to optimize their one-handed times is to learn new algorithms for one hand for cases they already know how to do two-handed. For example, F perm two-handed is typically done like this. But that requires some F moves, and it's a rather long algorithm. So for one hand, what people typically do is an RUL algorithm instead, which is like this. Now that's also a kind of long algorithm, but it's nicer than doing F moves. So what's important here is that RUL moves are typically nicer on one hand than on two hands. And similarly, RUD is pretty good for one hand as well. And that's because it's pretty much as RUL but rotated. And the reason these are good is because on one hand, Z rotations are really, really easy. But doing F moves sometimes requires you to pause in your algorithm. Another example of when you should do a one-handed algorithm instead of a two-handed algorithm is like Z perm. So if you're good at table abuse and do M and U, okay, I messed up. But like the point is that's hard and some people are good at it, but you don't necessarily have to learn that. And what you can do instead is the RU algorithm, which is like this. All right, so putting it all together, here is one example solve. So I'll be doing white, of course, and all my cross pieces are right here. So what I could do, let's see, I can put green down here, then do a wide turn to avoid rotations to put in orange, then put in red here, put in blue, and then instead of doing this here to put in green, instead I can do a wide turn to avoid another rotation, and then do this to solve the cross. All right, then we have this one and this one. So we can go, by the way, I'm looking ahead to these two. We can go like this. Then this one and this one, which can be paired up like that. And then do the ones I was looking ahead to, so like this. And then lastly, these two. Pair them up first to save some moves and then rotate. Then this is just fat soon, so I can do the wide turn here. It's nicer for me to do the wide turn with my ring finger, like that. And then undo the wide turn like this. And then here we have a J-perm. So the one-handed J-perm algorithm. And then like that. So I just want to talk a little bit about what to expect in terms of improvement. You won't be improving that quickly because a lot of one-handed solving has to do with how well you can turn. And of course, there are a lot of concepts like look ahead and all that that also applies to one hand. But I mean, you don't really think about how you turn for two hands. And for one hand, it's pretty much all of the learning process until you're like sub 20 or something. And remember, it's not just about how much you know and how much you've practiced, but you have to give yourself time to have your muscles grow and try not to injure yourself by turning too much. Make sure your cube is lubed. That also reduces strain and you can practice for longer. All right, that's it. Thanks for watching, and please leave a comment if you have a question or message me on Facebook. The link is in the description. See you next time.